Kelsey Zeiser with Light Reading for OrbTV, and we're here at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. And I'm joined by Patrick Lopez with Telefonica. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Kelsey. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you. So how is Telefonica taking an active role in utilizing open source to further its goals around automation and virtualization?
All right. So I think that we are at a point in our industry where we're understanding that the changes that we need to make 5G a profitable business are important. Why? Because realistically, we're looking at a tremendous growth of traffic, and the large part of this traffic is video. What does it mean for us? It means that users don't really see or know the difference between standard definition, high definition, 1080p, 4K, and 8K video. And obviously, people are not going to pay more necessarily to see that same video, that same 10 minutes of video. But for us, it has an impact that is dramatic. I mean, you can have the same video that has a weight on our networks that can be like 100 times more. And obviously, what it means is that as we're looking forward with augmented reality, with virtual reality, with 4K, with 8K, the problem is going to be bigger. So we have to be able to scale our networks dramatically, and somehow they correlate a little bit the costs from the growth of that network. And certainly, in order to do that, you need to innovate a lot. And open source allows that. Open source removes a lot of barriers for new entrants, for startup, but also for established vendors to investigate and start new products and new businesses. And for us, operators, it's a great tool because it allows us to also take back control over our networks. We can, for the first time in a long time, design and program our networks ourselves. So that allows us to invent new services.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And are there some major challenges, though, with using open source for virtualization, for example, like interoperability, standardization, and how is Telefonica addressing those types of challenges?
Certainly. I mean, people talk about open source, but the reality is that there are many different open source streams and open source technologies with different level of maturities. And for complex organizations such as network operators, buying a product, buying software, buying a solution means having someone behind that's able to deploy it, manage it over time. And open source doesn't necessarily provide all of that. So I think that from our perspective, what is necessary for open source to raise to the level of expectations that we have is that for vendors and for system integrators, it is necessary that a new class of system integrators emerge, if you will, in order to take a lot of the open source work and package it into a productized solution that they can sell to us. And I think that that's kind of the best of both worlds. So you have a solution that's open, that is programmable, that we can program ourselves, but a solution that is sold and supported and deployed by a reputable vendor. And I think that is really the direction that we're looking forward.
Okay, that makes sense. And switching gears a little to 5G, how will edge computing play a role in supporting 5G and other use cases like IoT, for example, or autonomous vehicles and next-gen services?
So we look at edge computing. I mean, it's a domain, and there are many edges. We found out. Reality, when edge computing started, it was a technology that was thought for the mobile networks. And the reality is that there are edges in the mobile networks, and there are several, but there are edges also in fixed networks, and there are edges in enterprise network. And the reality is that, well, the industry is still trying to find out what are the best ways to use those edges and what are the benefits for the customers. So you mentioned IoT, for instance. There are clear examples in the sense that edge allows for either a very low or control latency. And obviously that can be crucial for some use cases. In IoT, you can think of robotics, for instance. You have in Industry 4.0 manufacturing plants that use robots that are semi-autonomous. And obviously, right now they're using mostly Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi does not provide a great deal of security, doesn't provide a great deal of centralization of the manufacturing processes, which means that at the end of the day, if you were to deploy a 5G network with edge computing and virtualization, you are able to separate the data flow from the control flow, so you are able to provision all the movements, all the motions, for instance, for all the robots in a centralized manner. And then those robots can interact with each other in a semi-autonomous manner. And to do that, you need to have a very low latency, because obviously any disconnect in latency between each of the robots can have an impact in terms of motion. So having all the robots very synchronized with very controlled latency, that's something that cannot be achieved without edge computing.
And Telefonica also had some announcements this week with Facebook's TIP program.
Yes.
You could tell us more about what's new there, and also how you're helping rural communities with their connectivity issues.
Absolutely. So Telefonica has joined the board of the Telecom Infra project this year, as well as joined the board of the ONF this year. So these are two important open source based organizations. And the context of that is really to find ways to drastically change our networks. Why do we need to change our networks drastically? So that's the announcement that you're mentioning. We announced yesterday a new project called Internet para Todos, Internet for All, which is a program led by Telefonica to basically bring connectivity to the more than 100 million people in Latin America that do not have connectivity in our footprint. And this is done in collaboration with Facebook and a number of vendors and a number of governments. And the idea is connecting those 100 million people is very difficult. It's very difficult because first, the geography is complex. You have jungles, you have deserts, you have big mountains, and the technology that we have today in our industry has been designed primarily for cities. So high density areas. Those populations, they're very dispersed geographically. So I imagine you could deploy today's networks to cover them, but the cost would be prohibitive. And if you're covering a population that has 4 inhabitants per kilometer square compared to a city, it's not very optimized, okay? So, for instance, we deployed there technology of centralized RAN and open RAN that allow us basically to disaggregate the base station. And what that means is that you're deploying on off-the-shelf hardware, a software solution that can provide 4G connectivity, and that reduces the cost drastically, up to 5 times less cost than a traditional network. And then, in addition to that, basically in collaboration with the Peruvian government, there is a new structure that's been created that is called the Rural Mobile Infrastructure Operator, that allows basically local entrepreneurs to create and to deploy a network that they will operate on our behalf and carry our signal, and then we will do revenue share. And in addition to that, we found out that many people already have some connectivity services in those little villages. People that have a little store and they lease a line from us, and then they put up like a handmade access point for Wi-Fi, and they sell usage just like an internet cafe if you want. Now we're inventing a new way to allow them to do that with an LTE connectivity, so they can subscribe to our services, and we'll be able to send them a network in a box where they will be able to actually mount with an antenna for LTE that will connect to our network and provide coverage to this area. So it's really a multi-pronged, multi-stakeholder collaboration effort, and I think that's the key here. It's a collaborative environment, and to do that, I mean, we couldn't do it by ourselves, Telefonica, and that's why we enter at TIP and we enter at the ONF, because collaboration is key to invent those new ways, And there's technological collaboration, there's commercial collaboration, as well as regulatory collaboration that is necessary. And TIP and ONF provide a very good environment to basically create that new ecosystem.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Likewise, Kelsey. Thanks a lot.
I'm Kelsey Zeiser with Light Reading for OrbTV.